All right. Well, we've got a good amount of attendees so far. I figure we can go ahead and get things started. I'm sure more attendees will slowly filter in over time. But first of all, let me thank everybody for attending. I want to express my heartfelt gratitude to all of you for taking an hour out of your daily lives to come and listen to this webinar and hear what we have to say. So with that, good afternoon. My name is Michael Cantrell. I am the Public Outreach Chair of the Southern California Mediators Association. SCMA is an organization dedicated to mediators, to assisting mediators grow professionally and spreading the message of mediation to the general public. Today, my panelists and I will discuss the benefits of mediation training for students and staff in schools. I'm joined by Cheryl Epps, the Executive Director of Kids Managing Conflict, and Sean Gatlin, the Conflict Resolution Education Program Director for Western Justice Center. Finally, we'll also have Will Hoadley-Brill, who is a high school Spanish teacher at the South Pasadena High School. Unfortunately, due to strict teachers' schedules, Will not be able to join us until a little bit later into our seminar, but don't be surprised when a new face jumps on in about 20 to 25 minutes. Furthermore, there will be time at the end of the seminar for audience Q&A. So if you think of any questions that you'd like to have our panelists answer, please go ahead and use the Q&A function at the bottom panel in Zoom to enter in your questions, and we'll be sure to address them all at the end of the seminar. So thank you again for showing up. And Sean and Cheryl, let's start with the basics. What exactly is team mediation, and how does it play out in schools? Cheryl, we'll start with you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Well, good afternoon. Thank you for having us, Michael. So peer mediation is a process where students have the ability to connect with a trained peer mediator to help them resolve their conflict. It could range on various things, but the focus being that the youth are able to use their own strategies and skills that they've learned to manage their own conflict. And as I mentioned, the subjects or the reasons for it are varied, but they do that with the support of an educator, a school educator who has oversight of the team and the program, and with the support of their higher level management, so their principal, their other administrators that are also on campus.
Yeah, I agree with Cheryl. Basically what it is, it's youth mediation. You all with SCMA understand mediation, and the focus is youth focus. So we train young people from 4th grade to 12th grade in the process of mediation. They learn how to co-mediate with their peers and mediate their conflicts that happen on school campuses.
Amazing. So you're giving students this ability to solve these problems themselves. And what are some of the problems that these students are facing nowadays? You know, I haven't been in school for a very long time. So what are some of the issues that are facing today's youth? Cheryl?
Well, it's again, as Sean mentioned, that we have programs for elementary, middle school, and high school. So of course, the issues that come up would be a little different from being on the playground, someone calling you a mean name, or not sitting with you at recess, to something maybe at the middle or high school level, where we talk about things like bullying, or we might talk about teen dating challenges that happen in high school. Sometimes one girl's upset with another girl because of an issue with a boy on campus. So everything in between, we teach them to mediate those cases, and when at the end of that mediation session, they're able to actually write down what that agreement is. And sometimes the agreement is we're just going to agree to stay away from each other and not have any further contact. So you can write an agreement about whatever those conditions are, but those are also things that the youth are trained to do.
I mean, that's amazing. The level of issues, you know, to us it may seem negligible, but to students, this is their world. This is what they live in, and so it's important to give them that autonomy. And so, thank you both to your organizations for accomplishing that. Let me just jump right in then and ask Sean, how does Western Justice Center specifically fit into fostering teen mediation in schools?
So, well, we've kind of evolved a little bit, but our end goal with school campuses is to help them implement peer mediation programs. But we also start with traditionally trying to build relationships and trust within the school campus. And then they kind of progress to peer mediation specifically. And it looks like training and education through the Western Justice Center for the adults, the school staff, the admin, the superintendents, and then also training students as well. So our trainings for the adults is to really understand what all of this means, what it looks like, what can it look like, how do we implement it, and the Western Justice Center kind of helps as a resource to support both districts and independent schools in trying to understand and grasp what all this is. And then we actually go in and train students in the process of mediation, from understanding and analyzing conflict, from their own self-awareness, being able to kind of identify their triggers, understanding what reframing means, and restating and summarizing, trying to get the story. So we do that in with our students so that they're ready to help their peers when conflict does happen.
That's amazing. That type of training is very important. Let me just ask you, you brought up the skills of reframing an issue. What exactly, can you describe that to our audience who may not understand some of these topics that we as mediators deal with all the time? And sometimes it can be lost on the public.
Yeah, sure. So part of the process, we call it step 2, is getting the story. And understanding both sides of what happened in the conflict. So part of that is making sure as a mediator that you understand what's being told to you. So we reframe, whether it's a paraphrase or whether we reframe exactly how it was said to us, making sure that we understand what the story is. So we're just kind of taking vital bullet points that we hear and be able to verbalize what the actual story is. So that's kind of like what reframing is. And it's a hard skill. As mediators, you all know, you all trained in it. So just imagine some young people being able to understand and learn this process as well.
Yeah. And just to add on to that, to what Sean was saying, the benefit of doing that is so the person who is talking about what their issue is, they're able to actually feel a little better about knowing that they've been understood, knowing that they've been heard, knowing that their issue is clear. And it also allows for points of clarification. So, for example, if the mediator did get it wrong when they're reframing, then they'll have the opportunity to get that clarified by the person who's doing the sharing about what their issue is.
Absolutely. This is vitally important training to our students, and I'm glad that we're out here providing it. And as you mentioned before, you're dealing with all different types of age groups and all different types of school districts and all different types of conflict. So, how do your organizations go about tailoring the support and training that you provide to the individual school? What's the decision-making process? Cheryl?
So, as far as tailoring the process, what we try to do is have an ongoing, not only the initial meeting with the school, but we also try to set the groundwork for ongoing interaction. And so we'll get a chance to meet with the teachers or meet with the person who has oversight of their peer mediation program and talk with them about what's been happening. We try to learn more about the students. We try to learn more about the culture and the dynamic in that particular school, and that helps inform how we'll deliver the foundational training. But if there needs to be any additional enhancement because of some of the trends that are happening at that school, those meetings with the school teachers and administrators or the school as a whole, because we also want to have that informed by the mental health professionals that are also located on campus. So all of that information helps to inform how we can put together a peer mediation program for that particular school. Now, the foundational material will be the same, but how we use those concepts and how we introduce them and making sure it's age appropriate, those are all things that we do as part of that process.
Yeah, agreed to what Cheryl just said. We really kind of listen to the school community. As an organization, it's very difficult to come in as an outsider and think that, well, we have one plan and we're going to try to implement this plan and not listen to what the school community is saying. So we truly have to be adaptable. We sit down, we set goals, we set some strategy on what a training could look like, what help from us in implementing the program. So it is really a community-based organization kind of approach where we listen to the groups that we're working with.
And
Yeah, and if
so,
I could just add one more point, Michael, a key part of this process also is making sure that the proper students have been identified to be on a peer mediation team. Everyone's not suitable. So that process by itself, we rely heavily on the school team, the administrators and the teachers to identify which students are appropriate. And not to say they all have to be angels because, things happen, but the ones that are best able to actually sit and listen to someone else's issue, who's able to take the process seriously and who's able to use those skills and concepts that they're being trained to use. That's a very important part of the process in order for it to be successful.
absolutely. So it sounds like this is, again, not just a set it and forget it kind of training. This sounds like this is training that happens over months to years. It sounds like developing the training for the staff, developing and identifying students. How long, do some of these programs last for? How long have you been working with some of these schools?
Well, I've been fortunate enough to be in this field for 25 years. I've been in different kinds of capacity. I've been a peer mediation program coordinator. I've done some mediation work around diversion, around conflicts, and around youth offenders. Now, whether at the Western Justice Center, though, we have kind of focused on trying to really figure out sustainable, our work through sustainability in creating district-wide, a district-wide approach. So most programs can go from, and this, we always know this word is funding, right? So whether there's funding involved, 3 to 5 years. We personally don't work with school districts only if we have a 5-year MOU. It takes at least 3 years to see some kind of seedlings begin to sprout when you're planting seeds in a program like that. So that's, when everyone else is involved. To try to really shift the culture, it takes quite some time.
Yeah, and I would agree with that, and add that another component is so with schools you have turnover. You have turnover of teachers, you have turnover of different staff, even your vice principals and principals. So you can expect some type of turnover, and that also is what helps inform how the longevity of the process and how successful the process is. Because if the information isn't transferred over, meaning if everyone's not taking this program as a priority, then that also helps inform how long that program is going to last. So what we like to do is try to provide the schools with a model that allows them to transfer the learning, that allows the program to continue regardless of if whether that peer mediation team leader is at that school or if they transfer to another school. So it's an ongoing thing, and there's ongoing interaction. Let's say, for example, a teacher decides, or the peer mediation team leader decides that they want to offer an additional session on conflict resolution or something more specific. Then those are things that we also work with them about, for any additional resources that they might need from us. So it really depends on the success of those that are in place to operate the program, how long it will last and how effective it will be.
I see. So it's excuse me. So really, you're about setting up framework, some kind of overarching system to help deal with this, because as you mentioned, turnover is real. You spend so much time identifying good students or good faculty, and then it kind of, they move on, they graduate, suddenly you have to have a hole to fill. So, what are some of the steps involved from, say, the initial, as you said, planting the seedlings, starting from there, and over those 3 years, can you walk us through kind of some of the steps that your programs take to provide support? I understand that it's, very much tailored to the individual school and what happens, but are there some things that you've noticed, generally speaking, like, hey, if we notice this, it will move on to our next, we'll move on to our next stage and we're getting successful, or, maybe, if this happens, we have to pivot and maybe
Mhm.
design a new strategy. What are some of the factors that come into play when, again, working with these schools over these years? How do you tackle some of these problems that they face?
So I'll start with where KMC starts in the process, and then
Mhm.
I'll shift over to Sean, who can, when we pass her pass the baton to them, where they pick up and move forward. So we have an open application process that we have available for all schools, as we mentioned, elementary, middle school, and high school. And those schools are able to submit an application, excuse me, within the application period. We review the schools, contact them. There's information, some videos, just other additional information about the program that we provide to the schools to see if they're in a position to have the program at their school. We call it readiness. Have you identified school or students that would benefit from having this training? What can you tell us about them? What can you tell? This is where we also have that conversation about what's happening at your school. What would be helpful for us to know? And so once we have identified the schools that have received the grant funds that we do offer as a result of them applying, once we identify who those grant recipient schools are, then we reach out to them and we do that part of the process, kind of the intel of it all. And once we've identified students that are ready to go, then that's when we reach out to our partners like Western Justice Center. And Sean, if you can take it from there once we pass the baton.
Sure. So once we have communicated, Cheryl or Ann from KMC would let us know there's a group of schools that have received funding from them.
Mhm.
Usually they reach out and let us know that they are a KMC community school partner, and they are interested in getting training. So I usually communicate with them. We kind of do like a little meet and greet conversation to kind of ask all those key questions on which age group are you looking to train? Have you already identified your students? What days of the, I mean, we get into the logistics of what it will look like. And then myself and the team will go out. Our training is 2 full school days from like 8:30 to 3:30. Depending on, and we even do Saturdays sometimes for the schools as well, because they just don't always have the time during the week. But we will come in on Saturdays as well and do a full training. The first day is a kind of like a download or a deep dive into conflict resolution education. I mentioned before, analyzing conflict, understanding your triggers. Then we kind of talk about, the techniques and the roadblocks to communication. We even go into a little bit of like talking about implicit bias and how that plays a part with our older students around how that plays a part in mediation. And then the second day is a lot of role playing, where we bring in professionals from the field to kind of help us coach. They do breakouts of groups of 4, and they take the opportunity with the coaches to learn how to be mediators.
Wow.
And
Sounds like
Michael,
there's a
that's
full package there.
yes. And Michael, that's also where Sean was mentioning the role plays. When I referenced before about having a meeting with those schools and figuring out what the trends are, what some of the issues are, that can also help inform how we develop the role plays that we'll be using for the training sessions.
Perfect.
And
So it
if I
sounds
could
like, Yeah,
I'm sorry.
sorry.
So if I could just add, so what we also do at the Western Justice Center is that we have a flagship training, our ABCs of conflict, which is kind of like that initial introduction for staff, all staff, superintendents, school board members, everyone, to come and kind of learn and what really this all looks like and means, right? Some of them are a little resistant. They're like, what is all this, kumbaya kind of stuff you guys keep talking about? But we bring them in to kind of like help them understand, begin to kind of learn what the possibilities are of putting a peer mediation program in their school. And then the definite benefits, right? One of our successes with one of our schools is one of the counselors was like, I was able to be a counselor and not have to put out little conflict fires everywhere, where I could rely on the students that were trained to help him deal with some of the issues that were kind of coming up. So that ABCs of conflict is really a good step into trying to understand what all this work is. And then those schools, because we ask for schools to bring teams so that you're not the solo person trying to coordinate this, but you have some support. So we ask, schools to bring in 3 to 5 team members so that they can kind of really strategize what the possibilities are of doing this work in their school.
So it sounds like there's a ton of interplay between your organizations and the school districts themselves in terms of, not just identifying the students and the staff that would be most beneficial to, train in this program, but also how to specifically tailor their programs and the role plays that they go through to deal with the conflicts that are specifically prevalent at their schools. And I think that's, wildly important to, emphasize that there is this connection between what you guys do and the school districts themselves. And,
Yes.
speaking of
And
the use
Michael,
of, oh, sorry, go ahead.
it's all right. I was just going to say that's also another reason why it's so important. Excuse me. It's so important for um, the leadership teams at each school for them to have an understanding of what peer mediation is.
Mhm.
If they have that, then they'll see the value in it. And if they see the value in it, then they'll want it, they'll make it a priority. And if they make it a priority, then that contributes to the longevity. So it's very, very important that we don't just take this model into the schools, work with the team, work with the oversight person, and that's it. It has to be really integrated into all levels of that school, of their academic program, in order for everyone to see the value. The mental health professional might have an element that they want to add into it based on some things that they're seeing at that school. So it's kind of a wraparound approach that we take, and we come in and deliver it, but we deliver it tailored to what that particular school needs, being mindful of the same basic fundamentals that are consistently applied to each school.
Perfect. And I just wanted to also bring up, Sean, you touched on this slightly, but I just wanted to emphasize this, how beneficial not only is this for students, but for staff, because you mentioned the one counselor was able to go back to being an actual counselor, doing what they were supposed to be doing instead of constantly putting out these fires. So it's, again, it's not just the students that benefit here. Can you talk about, a little bit about how the staff specifically benefit from having these programs rolled out?
Well, for one, I mean, you just mentioned one, but then being able to, like, there's a lot of things that kind of happen within the classroom. If a teacher has an understanding that there's a peer mediation program on the school campus, they can write a referral, get that student some help. So in resolving whatever conflict may be bubbling up in the classroom, because sometimes that can take a lot of time to deal with from a teacher perspective, right? We all know teachers have a lot on their plate. They have a lot they have to get done throughout the day, and dealing with, I don't know how many conflicts can come up with kids, but we all know kids, so a lot. Being able to rely on their peers in order to help them talk things through, to listen to them, to help them come up with some kind of a resolution. I think the benefit is there right then, right? Whether they just need a moment, they need a space that they can trust. They understand that this process is also voluntary and confidential. So that allows them to be in a place where they can get some real help around conflict.
Yeah, I think that's great. And, benefiting staff and students alike is very important. And, picking the specific schools that you go for and where to implement these programs is important. And I want to also ask, how does your specific work benefit underserved areas throughout California? These types of conflict resolution trainings, they aren't just applicable to, Beverly Hills and Malibu. It's applicable to everyday life of everybody, not just a few select schools. So how do your programs specifically, benefit or provide or roll out to more underserved areas?
So for one, we definitely want to continue to target some of those schools in underserved areas, in
Mhm.
underserved communities. And so thinking about that, as you've mentioned, you have schools in different areas, and sometimes the conflict is going to look different, depending on where you are. So in some of the underserved communities, you could have conflict from, anything about students maybe talking about each other, maybe how someone's dressed or how someone appears or whatever it is, whatever kind of uh, issue that might be related to those underserved communities, where maybe they're coming to school and they don't have something or they're lacking something. And sometimes kids can be unkind and make comments about it. And so when that happens, that's also something that can be mediated with a peer mediator. That conflict is going to look very different in some of your more affluent areas where the conflict could be something else. Not to say that any one conflict is exclusive to another, but we want to focus on some of the underserved communities as well, because there's a high propensity for conflict around certain issues, so certain socioeconomic issues that maybe other schools would not have. So we try to give the students the tools to learn how to navigate through conflict and address some of those issues. And by doing that, not only the peer mediator feels a sense of let's see. Well, we say superpower, so I'm going to say the word superpower, but how nice it is to be able to help someone with their conflict. And that makes a student feel a certain way, a certain sense of accomplishment, knowing that they have these tools that they can use not only at school, but they can take them onto their sports team, into their social circles, when they're engaging people on social media, um, playing sports or wherever. These are skills they can take anywhere. And for the person who is receiving the mediation, who's on the receiving end, they learn how to now manage their own conflict, and it makes them feel a certain way as well, because they're learning how to manage their emotions. They're learning how to deal with their anger. And when you do that as a youth or a young adult, it makes you feel better about engaging other students. It makes you feel better going into your home knowing that you don't have to fight with your brother and sister every day. We can actually use some of this to resolve our conflicts. So it's beneficial for everyone. But in terms of our underserved communities, we don't have enough. We need to service more of the schools that are located in underserved communities, and that's part of the problem. They're not really aware that this even exists. So one of our goals is to be very intentional about reaching out to those other schools that may not have even heard about it, and help it so that we can explain to them the benefit of how it can best benefit their students.
Yeah, ditto to what Cheryl just said. At the Western Justice Center, we will work with who would like to work with us, but our priority is schools that are under-resourced. So the districts that we work in, both Azusa Unified, Pasadena Unified, and then we work in some schools throughout in the greater LA area, but they're all considered free and reduced lunch, which means those are the less or the underserved, under-resourced, I hate that word, underserved, under-resourced schools. But that is our priority. So through funding and our grants, we list those schools because truly, like Cheryl was saying, every single child, no matter what community you live in, these are life skills that they are learning, leadership skills, empowerment, They learn how to advocate and find their voice. So these skills are important and impactful across the board. But because the world that we live in, sometimes our schools who are in lower socioeconomic areas don't get the benefit of programs like this, or skill sets, or trainings, or workshops. So that's why KMC and WJC look and work with schools in those kinds of under-resourced areas, because we want to do this work with fidelity, and equality is part of that.
Couldn't have said it better. I think that the work you do for benefiting, I'm sorry, it was under-resourced communities
Under-resourced.
is vastly important. And I agree with the term. I think that's a very useful term to use, because that's the truth of it. It's just they need a little bit more resources to meet the demands that they have for the whatever they need. So again, thank you both. And at this point, I want to give a warm welcome to our third panelist here, Will Hoadley Brill. I want to again thank Sean and Cheryl. Now, again, Will, you are a Spanish high school teacher at South Pasadena Unified. Is that correct?
That's right, South Pass High School.
Perfect. And, you know, as a person who's directly involved in running one of these mediation programs, and as a student who also went through one in your younger years, can you give us a little bit of perspective as somebody who's gone through it, how this has benefited you, you know, during your childhood or adolescence into adulthood?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, thank you so much for having me. I am so happy to be here in this community to chat about my experience with peer mediation, both as a student and then as an adult. And now I'm a teacher who's also still an adult. Sometimes I forget it, but you know, I am still an adult. So as you can see, it is lunchtime. I am in my classroom. So I'm in between periods. So I will have to keep it brief and head out to teach my sixth period later here. But I am so happy to be back in this shared space. I've been connected to the Western Justice Center and Kids Managing Conflict for a decade, for 10 years, which is a long time. I did the ABCs of Conflict training in 2015, and not to reveal my age, but I was a sophomore in high school when I did that ABCs of Conflict training. I think I was the first student to participate in that training. So I've been around a while. I actually started in peer mediation in middle school. I was part of the first class of peer mediators at my middle school. And the way that I got into it was the teacher who spearheaded the creation of the program approached me and asked me, "Hey, Will," she knew who I was. I was in student leadership. She was like, "Hey, Will, do you want to help people?" That's how she looped me into peer mediation. And ever since then, that's really been the core of it, is that desire to provide resources, information, and structure to assist my peers in a bunch of different stuff. But in the context of peer mediation, it was in developing those communication skills and conflict resolution skills that was really helpful. As a middle schooler, I loved it. I loved the training. It was wonderful. We made some really great successes at the middle school level, and we helped establish that program, some years ago. And then I got to my high school. And I looked around and I noticed that there was a lack. There was, frankly, a lack of communication between my peers. There was a lack of communication between administrators, teachers, and students. There was a lack of a sense of community, connectedness, and an ability, and that sense of agency to resolve conflict. So when I saw that lack and I thought about the great experience I had in the peer mediation program at middle school, I decided to start our peer mediation program here at the high school. And so at my time at the high school, I approached the staff. I was the one spearheading the program, which is very distinct from what it was like at the middle school when there was a teacher who was spearheading the program. A lot of different, I had very different challenges than my advisor at the middle school did. But throughout my time at the high school where I founded that program, I saw the program shift and change because it really was student founded, student led. And our program has evolved to, yes, very much keep conflict mediation and conflict resolution skills at its core, but we also are engaging in conversations with and facilitating conversations about mental health, wellness, social elements, and social conflicts that are beyond the interpersonal. So we also engage in some other educational activities around wellness and mental health as well at our school. And then I'll keep this part short because I didn't do peer mediation in college, but I went to college as my peer mediation experience in high school was hugely impactful. And I'll talk about those skills in a moment. But it was so impactful that it made me want to engage in conflict resolution and peaceful conflict resolution as a career path. So I actually went to college with a declared major of international affairs. And within my first, I think, 3 weeks of the semester, I learned that international affairs is rarely peaceful. So I quickly learned that that was not the major for me, and I pivoted, and I actually got my undergrad degree in peace studies, well, Spanish and peace studies. So that thread really has stuck with me throughout my life. And then, I did grad school, I did the whole thing, and full circle moment, I'm now teaching at the high school that I went to, and I am one of the co-advisors of the peer mediation program at South Pasadena High School. And the reason I chose to become a co-advisor is because I still, to this day, see the value and the impact in this peer mediation program, in peer mediation programs in general, and in peer mediation programs, the peer mediation program at this high school. So as I have shifted from student to teacher and from adolescent to adult, I can tell you that the benefits of a peer mediation program and the skills that one learns in these programs are invaluable. I saw one of these comments, I'm sorry, I'm not going to scroll because it'll take me too long, but I saw in one of the comments in the chat, there are people that you work with as adults who lack some of these skills. As I became an adult, which is pretty recent-ish, as I became an adult, I realized, wow, these skills that I thought were sort of foundations for being a human person are lacking in a lot of professional spaces as well as personal spaces. So professionally and personally, these skills I employ every single day. To be specific, I can tell you that the skills associated with holding space for students as a teacher, but also holding space for conversations with colleagues when we have to have tough conversations, because that's part of the job, right? And being able to actively listen while holding those spaces is invaluable. Being able to really understand what someone's trying to communicate makes conflict / just conversations a lot more efficient and a lot less have a lot less animosity, right? A lot less that sense of me versus them or you versus you. And as a teacher professionally, I have to do a lot of collaboration and collaboratively design solutions or lessons or whatever programs, systems that meet the needs of a diverse student population. And the idea of collaboration and the techniques of collaboration I learned as a mediator. So being able to employ those skills is really important in my professional role as a teacher and as an advisor in all the different things that teachers do. And then obviously, personally as well as professionally, understanding and being able to identify underlying needs for behavior, for certain behaviors that some teachers might just say, oh, that kid's just, I don't know, that kid's crazy, or that kid acts this way or that way, or, writing a student off for a particular thing, being able to identify what is that student trying to communicate to me, right? What is that underlying need that that student's trying to meet, is a unique skill that not all teachers have, which is something that I learned. And then being able to creatively identify solutions. Again, peer mediation taught me to be creative when we're faced with problems that are difficult and that have many different factors, right? So being able to balance all of the things that are going on is a skill that I learned as a peer mediator. And that very same skill, being able to identify underlying needs, helps me in all of my relationships, all of them. Name a relationship, it helps me in all of them. Because sometimes people say things and you're like, that was not very nice. I don't think you were trying to be mean. I think you were trying to communicate this thing, or sometimes it's somebody's having difficulty expressing something and I'm able to facilitate that conversation. So, I will not go into specifics for privacy reasons, but let me tell you, I use the active listening skills and being able to identify underlying needs every single day in all of my relationships. I have a roommate who I have known since kindergarten. We've known each other for a long time. Let me tell you, really helpful for when, there are dirty dishes in the sink. I don't scream and cry. I'm like, hey, how can we make sure there are not to do dishes in the sink in the future, or something like that? Or when there are dirty dishes in the sink, I feel this way, right? I statements, all the textbook skills that we know. And any of you who are married or have long-term romantic partners or live with someone, or if you have kids, oh gosh. Anyway, and then just briefly, and then I'll open it up. There is a unique experience in being a peer mediator in a program and then coming back to observe it as a co-advisor and seeing how things have changed and how things have stayed the same. And I took a couple of minutes this weekend just to reflect on what are those unique things that I've been able to observe. And I think what I see now as a co-advisor is that peer mediation programs in general are a very unique space. There really isn't anything else like it, where students feel empowered to be agents of change in their own lives and on their campus communities, in a way that is distinct from any other program that I personally have seen. They're able to identify larger issues, and they have the skills to identify and then do their best to find a solution. So that unique space for agency and the ability to shift an environment is very powerful for students, particularly students who might feel alienated or marginalized in other aspects of the school community. And beyond just the critical skills that strengthen their interpersonal relationships and allow mediators to facilitate mediation, them having these skills, they actually become teachers. So they teach their classmates, they teach their parents, they teach their siblings, they teach their teachers sometimes more efficient or more helpful ways of communicating particular things. And it's with that ability to spread the information that these programs are impactful. It's that it doesn't just impact, as we were discussing before I was sharing, it doesn't just impact the peer mediators in the program. It impacts the entire campus community, assuming sufficient buy-in, right? And I personally have seen students apply these skills outside of just the peer mediation space. And I do want to just take a couple of minutes because I'm just one person, okay? I'm just one little old person. What do I know? You know what I mean? So I took a couple of minutes on Friday in class and asked some of our peer mediators to share what being a mediator means to them and why the peer mediation training has been impactful to them. So if you don't mind, I'll just read you a couple quotes. I don't know how many I picked, but I'll pick a couple and I'll just read them to you. So I have a document up here. So I'm looking here. So the questions I posed to them were, what does being a peer mediator mean to you? And how has peer mediation training been applicable or helpful in your life in general? So one student said, being a peer mediator means being a safe space for students to be able to come and get help and support while trying to navigate conflict. I had many students use that phrase, safe space, or feel like they are safe, right? Which is not a given in all public school environments. That is impactful. Another student said, I've learned about handling emotions, internal and external conflict, and how different factors play a role in conflict resolution. That skill, something I talked about, is applicable not just in interpersonal conflict, right? Being a peer mediator not only taught me how to become a good and helpful listener and comforter to those around me, but it also taught me how to approach problem solving logically, solve problems, and make sure to keep myself unimpacted negatively, right? So that student is touching upon some self-care behavior, some self-care practices, which are really important. And this is the last one. It's a little bit longer, but I think it's important. Hold on, now I have to pick. Oh no, okay. I'll pick this one. Peer mediation to me is about preserving the relationships between people in a way that also allows every party involved to grow and think critically in ways that they haven't before. Peer mediation training has impacted my life by allowing me to be more aware of myself and others' emotions. It has allowed me to recognize emotions and act in a different way that considers others as well. Peer mediation is something that can help everyone. Right, so these students, this is students of every age in my high school, so 9th through 12th. They are able to verbalize and identify the utility of these skills for themselves and everybody else in their life. That's my story, that's their story, and I'm sure in 8 years they'll be back here talking because y'all have heard enough from me. So yeah, that's just a little bit of what I wanted to share.
Thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to share. I really appreciate it. I did just have one question for you, Will. I wanted to ask, just to help tie in the rest, as somebody who is now heading, a conflict resolution or conflict mediation program within schools, what kinds of support do you get from organizations like KMC and Western Justice Center, and how does that make your job easier? And how does that benefit you as a teacher specifically?
That's a great question. We attended the Peer Mediation Invitational last month in February, which was put on by the Western Justice Center, and it's so impactful for students. It is so impactful for students to be able to meet other peer mediators doing this work, and on top of that, we still use the Western Justice Center's curriculum in our training. We don't often bring them in for training just because I am one of the co-advisors, so I'm able to provide that training to them. But I still use the resources I got in 2015. I try to get updated ones. My other co-advisor has attended the ABCs of conflict training more recently than I, so we use some of the more updated ones. We use school tools. Have you talked about that yet, John? Okay, talk about that while I'm gone. We use school tools every single class. And then when it comes to KMC and kids managing conflict, a huge benefit to being connected to both of these organizations is an access to a network. And so I'm able to get other ideas and other systems from other teachers, educators, and schools, because we are not the best peer mediation organization. I don't know if they're the best, but we're able to get different ideas for structures and how their systems work. It's great. And then of course, something that is unique to kids managing conflict, I think, you feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, is the access to those financial resources and the expert knowledge, right? Because our schools are only as supportive as they can be. And sometimes we as teachers got to be creative. We got to reach outside, and we have to be able to access those funds, but also the access to those experts and the people who are in the mediation field, or people who have been in peer mediation for even longer than me. I remind my students all the time, I'm like, I did not invent this. Okay, it's been around for a while. It's been around. So there's other people have been doing it longer than me. So that has been the value in being connected to these organizations, is the network, the information, the resources, and the ability to just bounce ideas off of people.
Amazing. Well, I know you've got a hard out coming up soon, so I just wanted to ask you one last little question, regarding how do you see, as a teacher now, looking at these students growing up in this program, are you noticing a shift in the culture almost at your school? Are you witnessing how it's spreading out, or are you witnessing how this program is going beyond just the students that are involved?
I'm not going to take credit, but yes, there is definitely a shift in culture here on this campus, and there has been significantly. I think there are many factors that are contributing to it, including factors like the pandemic and the repercussions of the pandemic, as well as the Surgeon General's declaration of a mental health epidemic among young people. But we are having conversations about what do healthy social relationships look like, and how can we work to maintain healthy relationships with people in our lives, and why is that important? And we as mediators get to say, and here is why conflict resolution, peaceful conflict resolution, is a key element to maintaining healthy relationships and maintaining a healthy mental well-being, right? If you can't express yourself, you are not going to be able to maintain those healthy relationships. And if you can't understand what's going on the inside, there's going to be a lot going on. And adolescence is the perfect time. I mean, I think the earlier the better. The earlier the better. But adolescence is a great time to take advantage of those big feelings that my students are having, and be able to work with them in the moment, and put a name to the feeling, and how they can express that in a constructive way. So has there been a shift? Yes. Yes, there has, for sure. And if you have any questions for me, Michael's going to put up my email at the end of this, along with all the other panelists' contact information. So please feel free to reach out to me. I love talking about this, as you can tell. But fortunately, I have to go teach sixth period.
Well, thank you so much, Will. I appreciate you taking the time out of your day. Thank you so much for sharing your story, and have fun at your 6th-period class.
Thank you. Thank you. Have a good one, y'all. See you later.
Have a good one. All right, well, I just wanted to touch on really quickly, just the one thing that Will brought up very briefly, were the school tools. Did you guys want to talk about those briefly, the tools that, that he's using to benefit?
Yeah, actually, Will is speaking of the Western Justice Center has an online curriculum that is free for anyone to access. Is schooltools.info. And it's basically all of the components of conflict resolution education. There isn't a mediation component on there, but it definitely gives you the foundation to begin having these conversations with students. It is created to be facilitated by a teacher or an admin or whoever in a classroom. And there are about, I want to say maybe 8 to 10 lessons from understanding conflict to self-awareness to even understanding power and how that plays a part in the school community and in mediation. Communication without judgment. So it's a free online curriculum it wasn't created by me or the staff that I work with now. It was from the previous staff, but it is still very substantial and impactful and user-friendly.
Perfect. Well, thank you for sharing that. We've got a couple of really good questions here, and I'd like to now shift into a little bit of audience Q&A. There's been a couple of questions asked in the chat, and I think that we would want to address them. Just give a chance for our audience to have their questions answered. First question I noticed was from Inelli Cessna that asked, how do agreements among students get enforced? We have, obviously, as lawyers, we can rely on a judge to come down and say, this contract or this judgment is being enforced, and have the full support of, the US government, so to speak, to support that judgment. But obviously schools are very different. So from your perspective, how do staff and students go about making sure that students actually adhere to the agreements that they make?
Well, just like with,
go
go ahead,
Sarah.
John. Just like with adult mediation, those agreements are only as good as both parties are willing to keep them and preserve the integrity of that whole process of mediation. So it's good that we actually teach the same to the youth that are involved. As I mentioned earlier, they can write out their agreements, and hopefully that will help to prevent any other kind of problems in school, getting in trouble with the teacher for something, whatever, if it's anything related to that issue. But we use the same thing that we use in adult mediation, self-determination. And so by that, the students have to believe in the process itself. They have to commit to the process itself. And if for some reason one side or the other violates whatever that agreement was, they do have the ability to come back and revisit it and go over it again, or change some of the things that might have been in the previous agreement. So we try to teach them the same process that mirrors what's done as adults. And that helps them also to know that I do have some say or some authority over this agreement that I've committed to. So that does give them a sense of responsibility. It teaches them again about leadership without having to rely on an adult. But there's no enforcement that you'd better do this or else. Other teachers are involved. And I do want to say also, just to plug it in here really quickly, this is not a process that we just turn loose on students and they can mediate about anything. If there's ever anything that poses any potential risk or harm to any of the students, an adult is involved. And that's not something that we allow to stay just in the confines of that peer mediation process. So if it seems like it's something that needs to be escalated, then it can be escalated and dealt with at that time. But for the purposes of keeping an agreement, we rely on self-determination and teach them to honor what they said they would or would do. And if they don't do that, then let's come back around and see what next steps need to be.
Perfect. Thank you for sharing that. We've got another question here. Hold on one second. I wanted to bring it up. It is from, and I apologize with all of these names. I'm doing my best. And if I mispronounce them, I
You're doing great, Michael.
wholeheartedly apologize. This one is from Jody Prunier, who asked a really good question regarding how does this fit in with with parents? You know, it's one thing to train students and staff while in a school environment. Does the training that you provide, does the work that you do bleed over into parents as well, or does it stay focused more in the school environment with staff?
You want to take that?
Yeah, sure. So parents can be trained, absolutely. It also depends on the parent groups, how involved they are in the school community. Sometimes we do trainings or professional developments through the PTSA, which is the Parent Teacher Student Association. But parents are definitely informed, especially if there's a conflict that needs to be talked about and mediation may be the end result. Parents, have some say. So being able to train and educate the parents in this process is definitely beneficial. Sometimes when students are trained, they take these skill sets home. And so there's things that happen, like students will say, well, mom or dad or whatever, trying to explain what an I statement is and helping them be able to use what an I statement is, being able to reframe and reflect what they've heard from their parents. I've had parents call me and say, what is this that my child is talking about? And they bring it back to me. So we just kind of explain, that they either were trained in mediation or they went through a mediation themselves when they had a conflict. And these are some of the skill sets that they bring home. So it definitely bubbles. I call it the ripple effects. So no matter where or how, sometimes these skill sets always end up bubbling over into their personal lives.
Okay,
Yeah.
perfect. Oh, sorry, Cheryl.
No, and I would just add, it also helps to solidify that relationship between the teachers and the parents, so that the parents can give that support to the teachers that are managing their students in class. And now they've had a chance to see the benefits of it, why it's effective. And if they've got questions, we're certainly open to those questions, but it helps to build that bridge between the relationships with the parents and the students and the school faculty.
So that training not only obviously benefits, you do provide training to parents if they reach out and say, go ahead and involve me. But I think it's also important to emphasize that these types of communication skills, again, as you mentioned, they don't just bring students and staff together, they also benefit parents by bringing them to be more involved in the learning process and to otherwise go ahead and bring all of these support systems together, because each one of them interplay off of each other, whether we want to admit it or not. Parents, teachers, and students, they all have to work together in order to create a strong, positive learning environment. And so thank you to both of your organizations for providing this work. And thank you both for taking time out of your day to specifically come here and talk about, peer and team mediation to an audience. I hope everybody had an opportunity to, learn a little bit. And 1 second, let me go ahead and put up. This is everybody's emails. So if you have any further questions for any one of us, please feel free to reach out. Our names, our email addresses are right there. So thank you all attendees for taking the time out of your day to come and listen to us speak. And again, thank you, Sean. Thank you, Cheryl. You have both been wonderful. And Will isn't here anymore, but I want to thank him as well for his wonderful contribution to this seminar. And again, if anybody has any follow-up questions, please feel free to reach out to us over email. We'll be more than happy to answer.
Thank you,
Thank you
Michael.
all
And
so
thank you
much.
for having
Thank
us.
you, Michael.
Thank you all, and I hope you all have a great rest of the day. And if any of you are curious, we have SCMA is putting on seminars every day this week. So please check out SCMA's website. If there are any other seminars that are of interest to you, they're all free. So please attend if you can. Thank you all so much and have a great week.
Thank you.